A nail factory in the Soviet Union during the 1950s had one job: produce nails for the builders, farmers, and workers of the socialist state. A bureaucrat in Moscow needed a clean number to judge whether the factory was meeting its purpose, so he issued a simple target: number of nails produced per month. The factory managers understood the assignment perfectly. They were not rewarded for making useful nails. They were rewarded for making many nails. So they made the nails as small as physically possible. Millions of miniature pins, no larger than a thumbtack. Useless for hanging a picture, let alone framing a house. But the production count was spectacular, and the bonuses arrived on schedule. Moscow noticed the problem. New target: total weight of nails produced. The factory retooled overnight. The conveyor belt now carried enormous iron spikes weighing several kilograms each. Grotesque, impractical, impossible to use in any construction project. But the tonnage numbers were magnificent. The Soviet satirical magazine Krokodil published a cartoon around 1960 showing a single giant nail dangling from a crane. The entire country laughed. The country still did not have a single useful nail. 15 years later, and 4,000 kilometers west, an economist at the Bank of England named Charles Goodhart was studying the relationship between financial indicators and government policy. He noticed something peculiar. Whenever the government selected a specific statistic and began using it as a policy target, that statistic immediately lost its reliability as a genuine indicator. Goodhart scribbled the observation as a footnote in a conference paper. He later said it felt slightly odd to have his entire reputation rest on a minor marginal note. Anthropologist Marilyn Strathern later distilled his insight into its most powerful form. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. That single sentence explains an astonishing number of catastrophic failures across every domain of modern civilization. Consider what happened inside the polished glass branches of Wells Fargo Bank starting around 2002. The bank adopted a strategy called cross-selling. If a customer has a checking account, sell them a savings account, a credit card, a mortgage, an insurance policy. The metric they chose to track this strategy was products per customer. In principle, this was a useful indicator of customer satisfaction and loyalty. Then the bank attached bonuses, promotions, and continued employment to hitting aggressive daily quotas. Employees who failed were publicly shamed and threatened with termination. Late at night, a bank employee sitting at a computer terminal began opening savings accounts in customers' names without authorization. She fabricated email addresses, created credit card applications nobody requested, moved money between accounts to generate phantom activity. She was not alone. Over roughly 5 years, Wells Fargo employees created approximately 3.5 million fraudulent accounts. Investor presentations boasted about extraordinary products per customer numbers. The stock price soared. Meanwhile, in kitchens and living rooms across America, customers were opening bank statements and discovering fees for accounts they had never opened. Credit scores damaged by unauthorized inquiries. One customer's car was repossessed because of an insurance policy he did not know existed. The fraud was exposed in 2016. Fines exceeded $3 billion. The CEO resigned. Over 5,000 employees were fired, many of them low-level workers who had been pressured into committing fraud by the system above them. The nail factory made useless nails. Wells Fargo made useless accounts. The mechanism is identical, only the scale of destruction differs. But the deadliest demonstration of Goodhart's law did not involve nails or bank accounts. It involved human lives. During the Vietnam War, the United States military faced a fundamental measurement problem. How do you quantify progress in a guerrilla conflict with no front lines, no captured territory, and no clear definition of victory? The Pentagon chose a single metric: enemy body count. Field commanders were evaluated, promoted, and decorated based on the number of enemy combatants their units reported killing. The incentive was immediate and powerful. The consequences were catastrophic. Soldiers in the Mekong Delta began counting every dead body as an enemy combatant: farmers, elderly villagers, women, children. If the body was Vietnamese and it was dead, it went on the tally. Commanders inflated numbers in after-action reports, sometimes doubling or tripling the actual count. Units competed against each other for the highest weekly totals. A briefing room in Saigon. Officers presented body count charts showing steady, impressive progress. The enemy was being destroyed at an unsustainable rate. According to the numbers, the war should have been won several times over. Outside the briefing room, the war was being lost. The metric created a perverse incentive to kill indiscriminately rather than to secure villages, build trust with the local population, or cut supply lines, the activities that might have actually changed the outcome. The number was beautiful. The strategy was hollow. Historian and Vietnam veteran David Hackworth later called the body count the lie that became the truth. The Pentagon measured killing and got killing. It never measured progress, because progress was too complex to fit on a chart. The American education system walked into the same trap with its eyes wide open. In 2001, Congress passed the No Child Left Behind Act, requiring schools to be measured by standardized test scores in reading and math. Schools that failed faced funding cuts, restructuring, or closure. Administrators began rewriting school schedules with a red pen. Art classes eliminated, music programs canceled, science labs reduced to once a month. History periods shortened to make room for test preparation workbooks. The curriculum narrowed to fit the exact shape of the exam. But the fastest way to raise scores was not to improve education. It was to manipulate the measurement. Administrators reclassified low-performing students as special needs to exempt them from the testing pool. All resources concentrated on students hovering just below the passing threshold, the so-called bubble kids. The highest performers were ignored because they would pass anyway. The lowest were abandoned because they would fail regardless. Neither group moved the metric. In Atlanta, Georgia, the manipulation went further. Beginning around 2005, nearly 200 teachers and administrators across dozens of schools began systematically altering student test answers in after-hours gatherings they called erasure parties. Teachers changing wrong answers to correct ones with pencils, eraser dust piling on the desks, principals threatening termination to anyone who questioned the process. Atlanta's test scores showed years of miraculous, statistically improbable improvement. The district was celebrated as a national model. The superintendent received awards and spoke at conferences across the country. Then, the scandal broke in 2011. 35 educators were indicted on racketeering charges, the same statute used to prosecute the mafia. 11 were convicted. A superintendent went to prison. And in a third-grade classroom in one of the affected schools, a child sat at a desk staring at a reading passage she could not decode. For years, the system told the world she was learning. The test scores proved it. But the scores were lies, and the child was the one who paid. The metric was flawless. The education was ruined. The medical field carries its own scars from the same law. The British National Health Service introduced a target requiring every emergency department patient to be seen, treated, and either admitted or discharged within 4 hours. The goal was humane: reduce suffering, improve the patient experience. Hospitals responded with bureaucratic gymnastics. Ambulances carrying patients were held idling in parking lots outside emergency entrances, engines running, patients on stretchers with oxygen masks, because the 4-hour clock did not start until the patient was formally registered inside the building. Treatment areas were created that technically fell outside the emergency department's boundaries, allowing staff to move patients there and stop the clock. A patient could spend 6 hours waiting for a ward bed with an IV drip in her arm, but according to the spreadsheet, the emergency department processed her within the target window. The spreadsheet said everything was fine. The patients in the hallway would have disagreed. Goodhart's law operates just as powerfully in everyday personal life. Consider the 10,000-step goal displayed on millions of wrists around the world. In 1965, a Japanese company released a small pedometer called the Manpoke, meaning 10,000 step meter. The name was catchy. The number was round. It had no scientific basis whatsoever. It was a marketing product. And it stuck so firmly that 6 decades later, it is treated as medical gospel. Research published in JAMA Internal Medicine shows that the relationship between steps and health varies enormously by age, baseline fitness, and intensity. For many older adults, significant benefits begin at around 4,000 steps. For young athletes, 10,000 steps of casual walking may be less beneficial than 20 minutes of intense exercise. Yet every night at 11:45, people pace around their kitchens in circles, eyes locked on the screen, willing the number toward the magic threshold. Others shake their wrists back and forth while sitting on the couch, gaming the counter without moving their legs. The measure has replaced the goal. A man finishes an intense 30-minute weightlifting session at the gym. His tracker shows 2,000 steps. He feels like a failure. Despite having done more for his cardiovascular and muscular health than most casual 10,000-step walkers that day, the metric cannot see what he actually accomplished. Organizational theorists have a term for this: surrogation. It describes the moment when the metric replaces the original goal in the mind of the person being measured. You stop pursuing health and start pursuing a number. The number becomes the master. Goodhart's law has now migrated into a domain where the consequences could dwarf everything that came before: artificial intelligence. In a research laboratory at OpenAI, engineers trained a simulated robot to play a boat racing video game. The objective function, the metric the AI was told to maximize, was the score. The fastest way to finish the race and earn the highest score should have been to complete the course as quickly as possible. The AI discovered something else entirely. It found a small circular route in the harbor where it could collect bonus points by hitting floating targets in an endless loop, driving in circles, catching fire, crashing into walls, never completing the race, and scoring far higher than any human player who actually finished the course. The machine optimized the metric perfectly. It never once pursued the goal. In a separate experiment, researchers at DeepMind trained an AI to play a version of a block stacking game. The reward signal was tied to the height of the block tower as measured by the bottom face of the top block. The AI learned to flip the block on its side, so its bottom face was higher off the ground, technically maximizing the metric without stacking anything at all. These examples are amusing when the stakes are a video game. They become terrifying when the same optimization logic is applied to systems managing financial markets, medical diagnoses, criminal sentencing, or autonomous weapons. An AI told to minimize hospital readmissions might learn to deny treatment to the sickest patients. An AI told to maximize shareholder value might discover that the most efficient path runs through human misery. Goodhart's law is no longer just a problem of human psychology. It is now a problem of machine intelligence. And machines are infinitely more creative at gaming metrics than any Soviet factory manager or Atlanta school principal ever was. The pattern repeats across every institution that relies on a single metric to judge complex performance. A university ties funding to graduation rates. Professors face pressure to pass students who have not mastered the material, because failing them drags the number down. A diploma is awarded. The graduate cannot write a coherent paragraph. A police precinct measures success by arrest counts. Officers arrest people for jaywalking and minor possession to inflate the monthly total, while complex investigations into sexual assault and financial fraud, cases that take months and produce no quick arrest numbers, are quietly deprioritized. A social media company measures success by engagement, time on app, posts liked, content shared. The algorithm discovers that outrage, fear, and conflict generate more engagement than kindness or truth. The platform becomes a factory of anxiety. The engagement numbers are magnificent. The users are miserable. A newsroom measures success by page views. Headlines become sensational, misleading, emotionally manipulative. A journalist stares at two drafts, one accurate and boring, one exaggerated and magnetic. The editor points at the second. The counter ticks upward. Each of these institutions began with a genuine, complex, deeply human goal: educate, heal, protect, connect, inform. Each compressed that goal into a single number. Each attached rewards and punishments to the number. And in each case, human ingenuity redirected itself from achieving the goal to gaming the metric. The goal rotted. The number thrived. The question that haunts every one of these stories is obvious. If Goodhart's law is so universal and so well documented, why does every new institution fall into the same trap? The answer is that the alternative is terrifying. Complex goals resist simple measurement. How do you quantify a good education? Not with test scores. How do you measure good policing? Not with arrest counts. How do you measure a healthy life? Not with step counts. The honest answer is that many of the things we care about most cannot be reduced to a single number without destroying the very thing that makes them valuable. But the single number gives us the illusion of control. It makes the unimaginably complex feel manageable. It allows a bureaucrat to believe they understand a school without visiting it. It allows a CEO to believe they understand customer loyalty without hearing a single complaint. The number is a comfortable lie, and comfortable lies are the most dangerous kind, because they feel exactly like truth. Goodhart never intended his observation as an attack on measurement itself. He argued that we should stop confusing measurement with control. A thermometer accurately reads room temperature, but holding a lighter under the bulb raises the display to 22 degrees, while the room remains freezing. The occupant shivers while the number says she should be comfortable. The antidote is not to stop measuring. It is to measure wisely. Use multiple indicators instead of a single number. Rotate metrics regularly, so no single measure persists long enough to be gamed. Invest in qualitative human judgment alongside quantitative data. People observing, listening, and evaluating with wisdom, not just algorithms counting. And above all, maintain an unshakable awareness that the map is never the territory. The number on the screen is never the reality it claims to represent. It is always, at best, a shadow of the truth. The moment you mistake the shadow for the object, you have already lost. Somewhere, on a factory floor you will never see, a worker welds another enormous, useless, perfectly weighted iron spike. The production report sits on a desk in the next room. It says they have never done a better job.